Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Johnson. This is Studio Talk. And today we're going to be talking about the ToneX pedal. And I think an important distinction that I think is going to be vital for those of you who've either bought one or have one on the way or in contemplating getting one. There's an important distinction that I think is it's important that that distinction be made. But before I get to that, do me a favor. If you like this particular video or my other videos, do me a favor, like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me grow it. Now that's out of the way. Let's get to the topic of hand. Okay. So I think, we're used to modelers in this world, right? We're used to modelers. They've been very successful. You had the Fractal Axe Effects was really the first one that has nailed it and quite frankly dominated the market for a very, very, very long time. And then you had the Line 6 Helix, which took everybody by storm coming in because they'd had a history in the past of doing modeling in the past, but they were mediocre at best. But then they came out with the Helix and they took it to a whole new level and they really kicked it out of the park and they made it more affordable, okay, than you could get with the Fractal Axe Effects. And it really took a huge chunk out of the fractal sales. It really took a massive chunk out of them. And then, of course, you've got others that came on behind it. You've got the Quad Cortex that does a combination of modeling and profiling. And we're going to talk about that distinction, the difference between modeling and profiling, which is important for all of you to understand. Because all of these other things, these other devices that you're used to, when you adjust a particular setting, whether it's a gain, treble, boost, mid, max, main output or whatever, when you adjust those things, they try to do the very best they can to adjust and adapt in the exact same way it would be if I went down there on one of my particular amps and I adjusted the dials there, right? If I want more gain, I can simply reach over, turn up the gain, and I've got more gain. If I want to, take out the mids a little bit, I can just reach down and dial back the mids. Same thing I can do on a modeler. Well, you cannot do that on a profiler, not in the same way of the amp. And I think that is probably one of the things that most people, for whatever reason, just couldn't, and not couldn't because it's not an intellectual thing, but it's just foreign to them, really understand about the Kemper. Now, I've got a Kemper right down there, and I've got amps down there. And I love my Kemper, and I love my amps, all right? I love both of them. But that's where a lot of people with the Kemper totally misunderstood it because you can't just go in and dial those things in. Remember before I said it's like taking a picture. It's like taking a photograph, right? And so what you're doing when you're profiling is you're taking a snapshot of the settings as they are on that amp and that moment of time, okay? And you're capturing the way that amp sounds at that moment. Now, what does capture mean? Capture means that that sound is going to be a combination of more than just your amp, okay? It's going to be a combination of, obviously, the amp settings, which is where it starts. Of course, the guitar player and the guitarist have a massive impact on it, but assuming all things equal, right, you're going to get the settings there, right? It's going to include the sound of that speaker and that speaker cabinet. You change the size of the cabinet, change the size of the speaker, you change the tonality of the sound. We all know that as guitar players, all right? But it also is going to include the particular microphone you're going to use and the mic preamp that you're going to use. Also, the placement of that microphone. All of these things affect that particular profile. Whereas on a modeler, it's just modeling the particular amp, right? And so you're taking a picture of that amp, that mic preamp, that mic placement, that particular speaker, that cabinet, all the things that come into play, and you're taking a picture of it in time, okay? And so let's say, for example, you want to go to a setting that has less gain and less mids. What does that mean in the profiling world? You're going to have to adjust those settings in your amp, get it dialed in, adjust everything along the chain, your mic placement, adjust your levels on your preamp, everything there, and then you're going to need to profile that. And so when you want to go between that first setting and that second setting, you have to change profiles, right? You can't just go on a profiler and turn the gain knob up and expect it to act the same way as if I reach down on my amp, my hand's going over there as if I'm grabbing my amp, and I'm adjusting my gain on that amp. That is not the way profiles work. And so when you've got the ToneX system, right, if you look back over here, that's the ToneX software, and that's the modeler side of it, which is more similar to Amplitude in the way it works. I'm not saying tonality, but Amplitude and the way it works. But if you're going to go for the profilers, which is what we're all hearing when we hear this demonstrated, these are real amps profiled in the same way that you would do with that Kemper, all right, process-wise, the same way. And so it's important to understand that. Now, I talked before in the profiling process, right? The right mic and the right preamp make a difference in the sound. If you go through a Neve preamp, it's going to sound different than if you go through the preamps on your interface. Just like if you go through an API preamp, it's going to sound different than the Neve preamp and the interface. All of these things come into play. Mics are pretty simple. Most guitar amps are mic'd with a relatively inexpensive mic that we can all afford, an SM57, but also oftentimes there's two mics on a guitar amp when you're recording it in a studio situation or at home, and typically that's like a Royer 121 ribbon mic along with an SM57, those blended together to give you the overall sound that you want, the right balance of smoothness and roundness to kind of in your face and front and biting a little bit. Much in the same way when you record a snare, you record the top shell and you record the bottom snare part and you blend those two together to get the overall balance because they both sound radically different if you just A/B those two particular mics to give you that snare sound. Same way it is on a guitar amp. You all should know that by now, right? And so that's the way it is, right? So the next thing out there, every time I would see a demonstration on YouTube of somebody comparing the Kemper to someone else, and I watch them, and I just shake my head because overwhelmingly the vast majority of people out there doing the comparisons don't understand the fundamentals of what I just talked about. There is an art form to profiling. It is not just, hey, it's not plug and play, turn it on, and you get the greatest profile setting, the greatest emulation of that amp, right? Not emulation, but capturing of that amp and that entire process. There are tweakability things that happen. Now, maybe ToneX has made that process somewhat easier and slimmed it down, but that's why, as an example, in the Kemper world, if you wanted to get the most out of the Kemper, the first and foremost thing you have to understand is you have to buy your profiles from a quality guy out there, somebody, guy, girl, whoever, somebody out there that makes profiles and has got that process down pat, number one, has the ability to get a collection of amps that you're interested in, number two, and really number three, and most important, clearly understand that process. Just like taking a picture, right? You and me snapping a picture of our cell phone are not remotely going to get the same image that a professional photographer with that skill set, knowing how to use that camera, understanding composition, along with using a camera similar to what I use in here. This is a Sony a7 III that this has been recording on right over there, right over there. I've got a Sony a7 IV that I record from this particular angle. And these both have lenses that are like $1,800 lenses each on each one, and they're considered mid-grade. They're not even high-end. And so the better the quality of the lens, the better the quality of the image. That's how it works, right? So that's why we have mad respect for these people who have these skills and the tools to be able to do them best with. Just in the same way, profiling is like that too. And so most of us in the Kemper world, we respect a guy like Michael Brett, who has it down better than anybody else. There are quite a few people out there that make profiles and sell what they call profile packs for the Kemper. And these people, I'm sure, have no doubt, have already started doing that process with the ToneX pedal so that we can all get the very best that is capable of doing. That the pedal is a player. It's not creating the sound. It's a player, much in the same way. I'm going to use the term DVD as if anybody owns one anymore. But if you put a DVD in your player, does that have that much of effect on the quality of the recording, the videography in that movie? No. If all things are equal, if it's a 4K movie and it's a 4K player, for the most part, it's going to be identical, right? It's going to be identical. It's the player that plays the video that's shot on $100,000 cameras with $100,000 lenses and actually has good actors, blah, blah, blah. You get where I'm going with it, right? That's the same way in this other process. So when you get a guy like Michael Britt who has absolutely got this down, but that said, okay, there are a lot of people out there that sell their profiles that, in this guy's humble opinion, can't even remotely compete with the Michael Britt. I hate to say it. Tone Junkie seems like a super nice guy, and I'm sure I'd like to hang out with him, but I don't particularly care for his profiles. I don't think they're any remotely as good as Michael Britt's. But that said, that's a subjective thing, right? Just like there's a lot of us aren't going to agree on the same amp tone and amps and all these other things. But so make sure when you get that pedal and you're going out and you're trying to find profiles for it, there's going to be a user community. It's fun to play with the user community, people who profile their amps at home. But the reality is most of those people are going to be in the same situation. They haven't gotten it down. I'm not all of them, but most of them are doing the best they can. And so you're going to get your best profiles to be able to use with that ToneX pedal or the Kemper or any other like that, any that's a profiler versus a modeler. You're going to be able to get that by buying these packs as they come out. So you'll want to search for who has the best reputation. So if you don't know it, Michael Britt's out there. It's called MBRITT.com, something like that. Michael is the longtime guitarist for a country band that started back in the 90s and plays through to today called Lone Star. And so, but most of us in the guitar community have come to know him and appreciate what he does because of the profiles that he makes for the Kemper. He also does presets for the Line 6 units, the Helix, right? And so lastly, I want to touch on one important topic. A lot of people are making such a big deal about this player, not including the ToneX pedal player, because that's really what it is, not including effects, right? Well, does your guitar amp have effects? Does that Marshall? Does that Mesa Boogie? Does that Diesel? Does that Sir? I could go on and on and on. Friedman, do they have effects on them? No, they don't. So why should this? Okay. Does your gain pedal that you use on your board, does it have built-in effects, multi-effects on it for most of you? No, they don't. So you've got that side of it. So move past that. Use a separate effects pedal. Like I use the Line 6 HX effects with my Kemper. I quickly outgrew the Kemper's built-in effects, and I use that. It's just easier and simpler, right? And so I use that. Of course, I have some amazing plugins that I use for processing in post. Okay, so speaking of processing in post, people are getting hung up on where the effects come into play on this particular unit. Because it's a profiler, there's no way to send it out of the preamp, okay, post preamp, into the effects send, return back in, through power amp, and out to your speaker, which is the way many guitar amps work. There's no way to do it. Why? Because like I said, it's capturing a moment in time of a combination of the amp settings, that particular cabinet, the mic placement, the mic preamp. It's all of it in one, right? And let's face it, if you're in my studio or someone else's studio or a professional studio and you're recording your guitar, all of that stuff is going to be done post-processing. I'm not going to let you come in. Well, I'll let you do anything if you're paying me. But I'm gonna advise you strongly, do not try to track with your pedals. Maybe if you need to track with a mild gain pedal or a boost channel or something like that, sure. But if you're using a reverb or a delay or something along those lines as an effect, I'm gonna say, no, let's do that in post. Let's capture that amp, because that way, if we decide to change something down the road, we have the ability to do that without having to come back and re-record the whole thing. Because most people like me and others, I'm taking a DI of that guitar at the same time I'm taking that guitar amp. So if I need to reamp that later back on through a guitar amp or go back in through a modeler or a profiler or, a particular plug-in for processing, I can do that at that point and not have to ask that person to come back in and redo it, right? Just in the same way, if I want a totally different guitar amp on a track, but I'm not looking for a typical, I'm just wanting to double it, right? I can send that back out, run that through a different amp, different settings, and be able to blend those, probably plan them right and left to give a bigger sound there, right? And probably put, a very minor delay signal on it, maybe 10, 11 milliseconds or something like that to give it that space in there that it would be as if I doubled the track, right? If I felt that worked for the mix, but I didn't want to have to bring the player back in, I could do that. So anyway, these are options, right? So I would not worry about getting hung up on that. Okay, I think we've got to look beyond the traditional way of working. And let's face it, most younger people coming up today, me, diehard amp guy for a long time until these modelers/profilers got really good, and I quickly appreciated the value of them. But I think for most young people coming up today, investing in super expensive amps is kind of a fool's game, and I don't think any of them really do it. There are some, maybe if they have the money, but you're much better suited saving up and getting yourself, a high quality profiler/modeler. And that's what's so freaking compelling about the ToneX is they have now put that in a reach where you're not modeling an amp, you're actually capturing a real amp with everything that includes. And those of us who love playing through real tube amps and the nuances that come into play and the interaction that happens when you do that, that's where most modelers fall short, in this humble guy's opinion, and many like me. But I can certainly willing to make the compromise in certain situations. I would much rather take something like a HX effect, or a Helix, or a Quad Cortex, or a Kemper, or an Axe Effects to a gig versus lugging around heavy amps, right? And so that would be my particular preference. But they have put this in a price range that is so compelling, so compelling. But there are other alternatives out there too. You've got the HX Stomp, which gives you a scaled down version of the modeling and also the effects for just a few $100s more. So really, if you're buying this, you're trying to get that real amp tone in a way that you just can't get close with the modelers, but there's always some things missing, and some of us are picky about that. If you're not picky about it, play what makes you happy. You should do that regardless, right? So, kind of think about these things. I think it's important that you understand that. So hopefully, I've been a little long-winded here, but I think it's important that people understand that, because to do that, that's how you're going to get the max benefit out of it. Now, I'm going to say this, right? And it's going to come across as an I told you so, and maybe it is. But I originally did a video on my particular channel about the ToneX, application when it first came out, and the plugin / the application when it first came out. And I said, is this going to be the Kemper killer? And everyone in the comments say, you should go back and read it. It's interesting. Everybody in the comments section just laughed and said, you're out of your mind. There's no way these guys who make Amplitude could come in and do this. Well, right. What did Line 6 do with the Helix? Well, but anyway, you know what this particular pedal in less than $400 is going to do? It's going to kill the living daylights out of the Kemper. Mine is going up for sale. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this particular channel. There's one thing you can always count on this particular channel. I'm never bought and sold by any particular gear manufacturer. I always will give you the most honest opinion that I have, and that's one thing you can always bank on in this particular channel. So if you like this particular video, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. It helps me grow. I mentioned that in the beginning. Let's leave some comments down below. Tell us what you think. Maybe you've got one. Share your experiences. Maybe you've got one on the way. If you've got some questions, ask each other those kinds of things. And if you're just considering, well, it's the same kind of thing. But usually people are quite engaged on my particular videos, and so I'd appreciate it if you would too. If you do home recording and you're interested in that stuff, do me a favor, check out my other videos. I think you'll find them helpful, all right? But until next time, I hope every single one of you have a great day. Bye-bye. I have to say that was massively stupid. I'm so stupid! I just recorded the whole video, the whole damn thing. And I left the cycle on in Nuendo, which means it only recorded over and over and over 8 bars. That's it. It kept recording over and over and over. I got 50, 100 takes, I imagine. So I'm going to shoot the whole video all over again, and that's what this one's going to be. Hello, everybody. I'm Barry Johnson. This is Studio Talk. Well, if I looked at the camera, this would be a hell of a lot easier. Okay, let me get my eyes straight here. See if I can get my act together so I can get this whole thing started. It's just one of those Sunday mornings, I guess. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Johnson. This is Studio Talk. Well, today we're going to talk about whatever the hell the damn name is. ToneX pedal, by the way. Oh, gosh.